15th. Let me. All right, so last week we discussed, we captured some stuff in this doc. Oh, hold on. We captured our work last week in this doc, I want to say about here and below. And I was to merge it into the Markdown doc. I did not do that. So that's kind of where we are at this point in terms of from last week's pickup. I think it was just 3 of us last week, me and Emily and Jennifer.
I believe so. Welcome, Randall.
Okay. Well, yeah, who else here? Randall and Zoom. Just stay there. Randall and Krob. I thought I saw Krob on. Maybe not. Okay.
Looks like he jumped
I'm
off.
here.
Randall's
Okay.
still here.
Gotcha.
Randall, would you let Art know what we discussed at the last meeting so that he is duly informed?
Sure. So basically, we're documenting the problem, and we're trying, more than documenting, I would say identifying the problems. And kind of we talked that over just now, like in our previous meeting. So our deliverables for you guys are going to be like a prioritized list of problems that you can use to essentially build the offerings and services of our PSIRT.
Got it, right. So your group is the problem space, problem definition, right?
Yeah, and we're also, to a certain degree, we're also going to be tracking and kind of like, I said, like, yeah, but it's kind of, I would say, like, I don't even want to call it like the head, but I guess in a way, like the objectives, if you will.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense, and the order makes sense to me. What's going on here? Hang on. And there was some of last week's discussion here. I'm going to scroll down to it for a moment. So the first part of this material is just from me, and it occurred, a month or so ago as we were talking about the open source CERT in the bigger group. Only press page down so many times. I've got a pretty serious sort of Google Docs scrolling delay. I don't know if it's me or if it's folks are seeing it remotely as well, or it's my network or what's going on. But part of my pausing is unfortunately waiting for like screen updates to happen. I don't think I'm going to check chat. Hang on here. Oh, good. Probe is back. Awesome. So Randall, from what you were just saying, I think we certainly want to Of course, we want to consider the the problems we're trying to address with the services. I don't think we need to wait. We don't need to wait for a serial process to complete, right? Or
I wouldn't say so. I would probably say that, I mean, a lot of it, I don't want to say it's self-explanatory, but I mean, it kind of is. So I think that we can move forward, and maybe in the next meeting of this group, we should have, at least as my group keeps meeting, our idea is that we're going to keep building this list out, and I can share with you the I'm gonna break or pull apart that list. So I'll share on Slack the problem list, if you will. But I think that as this group meets, we can shape our solutions as the problems come in. But I think, generally speaking, from a general perspective, the what our services should be addressing, I think, is probably what everyone would immediately think. Really, one of the things that came up in our meeting, and Krab said this in one of our last meetings as a group, was that we kind of want to avoid situations like log4j. So and it's not just log4j. We pick on log4j a lot just because it's recent memory, but like 0-day situations. And really, what we're doing in my group is we're going to be talking to people, surveying them, getting their thoughts on how that problem may have been able to be avoided. And then, yeah, but I think that there's some pretty low-hanging fruit also that can be done. Krab, now that you're here, I'm sure that you have input on this.
I'm sorry, I was eating. What was the question?
Well, no, I was saying that, so our thing for the services is that we're trying to avoid like 0-day situations, right? So like, I think there's some low-hanging fruit that this group can get started on while they wait for us to survey everyone and kind of start getting the wheels turning there.
Oh, completely agree that there's process and kind of policy things that we can work out that are just universal security teams. And then, as this group 2 here continues on, eventually group 1 will find some amazing insights as we interview all these open source luminaries, and we'll be able to provide additional feedback like, hey, group 2, did you think about X or Y problem and how we can account for that? But yeah, there's nothing holding us back here.
Right. So yeah.
sorry for the jumping. Got some strange performance thing going on. So yeah, lovely. We worked through, I think, some of the stuff from the Markdown doc, made some edits, did a little bit of reorganization. I don't think we got all the way through it. One thing we may be able to do today is finish that off. I realize it's a little bit circular, but we're taking some content from the Markdown doc into here, and then the idea is to put it back. Yeah, Crow, I got this super awesome new Mac. I haven't been able to put anything on it that made it slow down yet. I got a wired connection. I don't know what's going on. Not normally a performance problem situation for me. Anyway, yeah. Do you come back, baby? All right. Yeah, so I think, again, at least one step would be finish off sort of the import and modify from the Markdown doc. Emily, I think you're one of the original authors of that, you and Francis, perhaps.
The
Does that make sense to
skeleton.
finish that off? Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought it was this. I lied. The skeleton doc.
That's the one.
I'm confused even more. Great. Let's see if I can get it to load. There we go.
That looks like it.
Yep. So sorry. Emily and Francis are the original authors of the skeleton doc. We were working through that. I don't think we finished. Perhaps we can finish. And again, then all of those results go into Markdown. Is that a reasonable flow?
Yeah, what we did is we copied like the keys and the milestones out of each section, and we just kind of went that way. But mine's kind of different. So
So, given what we discussed last time, Art, we restructured a few of the items because they appeared to be out of order from like a process perspective, as well as ensuring that we have the appropriate feedback loops. So, for instance, 2.4 got moved to 2.2. I believe we actually ended up swapping 2.4 to
Yeah.
2.2 respectively.
I recall that. Yeah.
From there, we look like we started defining what some of those milestones were, but didn't quite get through everything. And then, like you said, Art, we're reviewing the skeleton doc to see what's already there that could be leveraged and what we need to call out as a resource request.
Excuse me. All right, so I'm gonna, if we haven't finished, I'll suggest finishing off that, import from the skeleton doc. Hopefully it will show up here and be usable, and we can sort of close off that piece. Let's see. It's really impractical to work this way. Let me see if I can do anything about it. Can I ask someone else to share, please? I don't think there's anything faster I can do practically. This is going to be super annoying for everyone else, myself as well. I'm happy to try to run things and edit, but thanks.
Can everybody see that?
Can see.
yeah, looks good across.
And we want this skeleton doc, right?
Yeah, I believe we have more to pull from the skeleton doc.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Let me know when to stop scrolling.
Sure, I'm trying to figure that out.
Keep going, we're pretty far down. There we are.
Let me see if you are there. Yeah, even another page or two, Krob.
Sure. And then I'm going to flip screens real quick. So it looks like, oh, there's only 4 things in here. Look at that. Not a lot to do at all. So where would we like to go next? Do we want to potentially start putting in some key steps for each of the areas, or talk about like what types of resources or time we might need?
I'm in agreement with putting in some key steps.
Okay. So,
So I would suggest then under 2.1, we have defining intake processes. We also have those ones as well.
You want to copy and paste those over and we can start breaking them down and then adding and subtracting and
I will move them into the 2.1 section that we have that already has comments.
thank you.
So the first one is to support secure communications between maintainers, researchers, and organizations when receiving vulnerability reports and or proof of concept code. This does not read to me like an intake process or secure this is more the implementation of the secure communications, which we've already defined previously as needing, which sounds to me like we need a tool to support that, which means licensing and support.
Mm-hmm.
either way, would that be a section 3 thing? Because that's like an execution thing, no?
It's a good question.
So if this group feels that that capability is a requirement for the CERT, then we would document that and then push that over to team 3 to actually plan and execute for.
I think that would be appropriate.
I agree.
So do you want to start even more basic is in defining intake process?
We can certainly do that. So if one were to assume that we already had a tool for us to intake requests for assistance and to catalog the services that are available, the skeleton document that we have on section intake for requests to the CERT has an initial rough outline of what that looks like. And it assumes a minimal service value of assistance with vulnerabilities for whatever that means.
So is the idea that we're going to intake anybody?
Not necessarily. Nothing within the skeleton or any of the previous discussions that we've had prohibits anybody from completing an intake request or completing a request for service. However, there is a caveat within one of our sections for defining conditions and triage of those requests. It's the one that we moved to 2.4.
Would it be better, I wonder, just a flat out question, if it would be better to approach people and discuss it? Because I feel like, not that I see this happening, but I mean, it is a potential that the intake process can get clogged up pretty easily. No?
I think the one area that we wanted to avoid in direct engagement with projects was we didn't want to be seen as barging in. It was more request based, given that if they have identified that they need assistance, they can come to our catalog of services and identify which of the services we have that would be beneficial for them to request, instead of us going to them and saying, I think you have a vulnerability. Let us help you solve that.
I think I was thinking more along the lines of actually, I guess, more advertising, like
Okay.
it exists and that if you're interested to let us know. So therefore we don't end up supporting my 20-year-old Docker containers. No, they're not 20-year-old, but you get my point.
So that would be breaking it apart even further so that we have a general intake process. But we also, within the skeleton doc, talked about a pre-registration.
Okay.
Do you know where that was, Emily?
Give me 1 second. It's under idea robot.txt/vuln.md that allows us to fetch this information. Lots of excellent uses for this. The idea was to reduce the timeliness in individuals filling in the request for service form. If they had the file, they could link it, or we could have something go and scrape that content to pre-populate the tickets when they click on new service request. Is that similar to what you were thinking, Randall? And that
Yes, it was.
we've already done the engagement? Okay. And that pre-registration piece will require coordination.
Yeah, we'll have to have some community outreach describing what it is, have value proposition. We'll need to have a procedure documented.
Well, I think
Sounds
we
like-
talked about in CERT 1, don't we have like a,
Yeah.
what was that buddy? The buddy,
Security buddy.
yeah, security buddy.
Yep. Yeah, and we would add, robot text or whatever into security buddy.
Reminds me of the old Bonzi buddy from back in the or Bonsai buddy. Remember the weird ape that hacked everyone's computer?
All right. So do we want to take this intake section and input into what would that be? The section 2.1.
I think that would be beneficial.
Okay.
Let me also bring this up because we're doing this in group 1 that we discussed about, like we were talking about representative projects. Should maybe those guidelines also apply to the projects that we intake? So therefore the problems that we identify are the same problems that this group is solving, at least for the same people, kind of sort of.
Could you restate that, Randall?
So that in group 1, we said in the representative groups that we were going to survey that we were going to qualify like what is one of these quote unquote representative groups. So what I was saying was, should we not also make it in this group part of intake that these groups should follow the same or at least very similar guidelines? So therefore the problems that we identify for group 1 are kind of solving the problems for the same group of people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel that's reasonable. We want to make sure we're addressing the valid business problems.
Because I think another big thing that I think is important, this is because I'm part of the end user working group, but I recently found out that end user, even in W3C and pretty much every standard you can think of, actually does not mean like end user, but means like an enterprise organization user.
Sure.
I didn't know this.
As someone that has attempted to resolve confusion around end user versus adopter, I can definitely attest to that. There are multiple explanations for each of those in different statuses, depending on which foundations that you're in.
Interesting. So it's not because I thought it seemed to me like most of the time, at least, we're talking about enterprises. We're not talking about, mom and pop shops or something like that. We're not, you know what I mean?
So would it be a useful exercise for this group to kind of adopt some personas? So we're using the appropriate language. So when we say end user, that what that constituent, who that person is documented, so everyone has that same understanding. Would that be worthwhile work for this group?
I think so, but I think that's a group 1 thing. because that would be part of understanding the problems, if you will.
Okay. Action item Randall, document
Yeah,
desired personas.
I just gave myself more work.
Stand by, I might actually have a starting point for you.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, wherever possible, leverage what we have. We have some personas as part of the vulnerability disclosure working group. I know a lot of good foundations also have similar things, so we can kind of synthesize all that.
But anyway, yeah.
So we're going to add in the materials from the intake into section 121. Is there anything else underneath 2.1 here? And we flash that up again. Documenting, preparing materials for maintainers to educate on the services of the CERT. So identifying our core set of services. Is there anything else? So intake is a core service. We want to talk about triage next?
I think that would be good.
Or
That'd be a good one.
do we want to talk about a bug bar? How do we want to phrase these things?
So I think that, so if I'm going one by one on what's on here, I think that I don't think support or like, no, I think triage would be good.
Okay.
Because that's really where our service starts, is triaging problems. Now, let me say this. Now, like, I think it would be best if, as I said, the communication and the solving of whether or not we're involved. Because I'm also thinking in terms of like, just in general, like tracking problems. So if we already know the set of projects that we're tracking, then I think the triage gets easier because we can just involve ourselves. If that makes sense.
Second here.
And my point of view comes from what, like in Gen 2, when we find bugs like this, especially on the security team, things tend to go better if we know like it's a certain project that already knows who we are, works with us to some degree. So yeah.
So what types of things do we need to account for with triage? Spell triage correctly.
Well, I would say to begin triage, even before triage, wouldn't most of these projects need a security.txt that actually states that they're involved with us? Would that be the first step? Because I'm thinking about a researcher disclosing it, and that would probably go to a security email that we should, if it is a project that is signed up with us, that's how we would receive alert of the problem. No.
So I want to introduce a caveat there.
Yeah.
Pre-registration doesn't necessarily exclude them from taking advantage of the services. Rather, it's to shortcut the information collection that would need to happen. If a project doesn't have a security.txt or .md file, that shouldn't stop them from leveraging us. It might make our work slightly more difficult from a triaging perspective, because we don't understand if the individual reaching out to us is a part of the security team associated with the project. We could probably easily determine whether or not they're a maintainer.
Let me also ask you this, Emily. Wasn't it part of our goals that we wanted to address, I think, in year 1, like 10 incidences?
I think we turned that down, but yes.
Because see, I have a good memory.
I don't think anyone questioned it.
No, it's just I sometimes have to point it out just to, because everyone around me tells me that I have a horrible memory, and it's like, no, I remember things and no one around me does. But anyway, my point is like if that's like, I would wonder if being easy right now would be a focus, so that way as we like gain experience and grow, we can open it up to more people and more situations. What do you think about that idea?
I think that's certainly beneficial.
Because I would like tracking things at a massive scale, I fear would be like very, or can get very complicated very quickly.
So, Art, based off of the last discussion that we had, where 2.1 was going to be around intake processes and the management and service system associated with that, and then we flipped 2 and 2.4 to be inversed. 2.4, I believe, is supposed to be the triage and the conditions, the new 2.4 associated with that intake. Given if we've already defined what our intake process looks like, there should be enough information in there for us to start rendering decisions of triage and importance and any conditions that may persist that would prevent us from taking on a project, which in the skeleton doc, I think we initially started talking about them, but did not fully confirm.
Yeah, that all sounds familiar, and my performance is fixed, I think, but I'm still trying to assemble a mental picture here. So we did talk about, at least I recall, I think at least my thought on triage was, well, a couple things. We have some flexibility, so I would not want to put, numbers on cases or types of cases. Cases are different sizes and shapes too early in this process. And also triage being a fairly operational thing, it might be the sort we may want to provide some guidance or even requirements or recommendations, but the actual team staffing the CERT should have significant, I think, control over their triage process. Again, I don't have a great picture of what this looks like in the future. Potentially, is there some sort of oversight or management that wants to be involved in that? But
if I may,
yeah, please, yeah.
I think that we kind of had this in the call, and that's why we decided that we wanted to go for the 10 incidences, because it really, if you do start thinking of this to scale, that's kind of what happened in the call. And Crob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you start thinking of it like to scale, it kind of gets real complicated real quick.
Yeah, but I mean, is it 10 incidents of what? There's a vulnerability in a project that is used by a bunch of, what's the size of the 10 incidents?
Yeah, we as a SIG need to agree upon what we are interested in taking on.
Yeah.
Do we want to do the kind of cradle to grave vulnerability management? Are we focusing in on mentoring and empowering these teams and giving them tools to do it themselves? Is it somewhere in the middle? So we need to define that.
I'll at least say, my sort of personal gut opinion reaction, whatever, coming into this was there seemed to be a lot of OpenSSF and I guess even LF efforts, to support all sorts of open source and projects and maintainers and everyone involved. My sort of gut and immediate read on the CERT is this is actually, yes, operational, right? Vol management, vol coordination, disclosure. Either support for a maintainer or a project that's already doing some of it or wants to do some of it. It could be supportive, but it could also be, hey, we're all too busy to do this, but it would sure be great if it got done. Bam, the CERT steps in and does it, right?
Yeah, and we could help potentially by writing advisories or notifying the distros list, or kind of helping making sure downstream communities are aware that this got patched. A lot of different things we could do.
Sure. Yeah, no. So
what about, like, could we also go as far as like saying, like, we're going to handle, for example, 0 days, and then we have like a type of vulnerability, so therefore we don't like say, oh, we can handle everything, and then it becomes too big?
I think one of the things that we talked about last time that would prevent us or that would allow us a little bit more flexibility in that is publicly stating what the skills of the current CERT has for our ability to respond to things, because there may be occasions where the current CERT rotation lacks a particular skill, such as kernel level security, and therefore any kind of requests for assistance that come in with that are probably going to be slightly more limited in engagement. But that should not impact our ability to triage the importance of a service request. It might just elevate the fact that we have a shortcoming in the current skill set.
Well, and then if it's kernel, for example, we could make a love connection with somebody on the kernel security team
Correct.
and help educate that finder the appropriate way to report this type of problem is through, you know, X or Y process.
Right. I'm on the kernel security team, by the way.
Kernel security team gets a little grumbly if you interfere with their process.
Yeah, which is why I do everything through Gen 2.
Well, and I mean, I did this in the last 2 or 3 weeks. My experience is most projects get grumbly if you don't do things the way.
Yep.
You know, they're pressed for time for the most part, right? There's sort of some degree of done in volunteer time, so I get a lot of attitude in a legitimate way, in my opinion, right? Hey, I've got a path for this. Please do this path. If you're doing something extra, like that really messes up my flow and breaks my efficiency, please don't do that. So please do what I already said to do, which is report it this way or that way.
So that's
Yeah.
a really good example of one of the things that Francis and I had talked about previously when we were working through the CERT skeleton, is that understanding if there is an existing security process in place by anybody that makes a request of the team could certainly have a larger impact on our ability to triage and provide support, particularly if they don't support embargo, or maybe they do, maybe they don't do responsible disclosures. Maybe they do, those kinds of things, because from a personal engagement, also from a potential legal perspective, those are all going to have an impact. It, particularly since we are volunteering services back to the community, there is some level of agreement, such as, did they agree to adhere to our processes, or are we going to be beholden to theirs? And if so, does anybody on the CERT team have any restrictions from their employer on being able to assist in that capacity? Particularly when you start talking about licensing, and any kind of security support could be considered a contribution. So like, these are all sorts of questions that we'll probably need to think of going through a triage process. Like if you have something that comes in and you're sitting down and trying to identify personnel to be able to support it, any potential conflicts, any handoff that may have to happen if there's too many conflicts, and whether or not you need to engage with the foundation's legal team.
I would say this is why I think like having a lot of this put in place before we actually have to be like activated would be like important. Not essential, but important.
Would it be a valuable activity for one of our streams here to start to collect a catalog of contacts and project processes that we would have both to leverage for the team, but also potentially share with the broader community? This is how to report a bug to the kernel, and fob it over to their instructions. Would that be a useful activity for any of these groups?
I think that if the group one is going to be talking to everyone, they could, just take note of who they talk to and just keep. I mean, if also security buddies out of group one, so I'd say group one would. It sounds great. I just think if group one's going to be doing all that engagement, then they might as well just record it.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned the answer is going to be, for 9,000 projects, you're going to have 8,941 ways to report things, but there's probably some better categorization than that.
I would encourage that we keep the end goal in mind, because you don't need 9,000 projects to fix 10 incidences in a year. Unless
just that the list of open source projects and their security contacts or processes might be a large list, I guess is all I'm
Correct.
saying.
Correct.
Now, if we're going to pre-select, I'm struggling still a bit with the 10 incident number, but if we know in advance who we're going to talk to, that's obviously easier. And I would really treat this as a process thing, right? A step in the engagement model is check with the projects involved. Do they have reporting paths? Do they have processes? Do they, can we work with them? Do they agree to follow the CERT process, or do they want the CERT to follow theirs?
I agree with the ideology that we should definitely have an end goal of what we want out of year one. Like, no matter what, like I think that's important, because as I said, I think if we're gonna do if we're gonna take it for what it is, like a first response unit for all of open source, that's very complicated. Because you're right, it's precisely for some things that you said, it makes going to be very complicated. So that's why I think 10 incidences is somewhat of a low number in my personal opinion, but like,
yeah,
I just my point of view, like I do think that there should be a goal in mind of like, where can we say that we were successful in putting this together, or should we revise it and maybe modify it in some way so that we do meet certain key performance indicators.
Before we commit to any number of incidents, we need to have a service catalog of what we are able to do. We need to have our definition of what is an incident, how our criteria for acceptance. We have a lot of work to do before we put the mission accomplished flag up and say we're going to do 10 things. We don't have a concrete list of steps for section 2 yet to be able to even start scoping things out.
But at least, I guess, agreeing that there is going to be a specific number that we're going to agree to, that of incidences that we handled, would be helpful.
Yeah, but is an incident, somebody asks us, hey, what's the kernel security team's email address? Does that qualify as an incident or not? Do we count that, as we're filling up our incident thermometer?
Right.
Success, or does it need to be Randall wrote a patch? Is that the level, the threshold of an incident?
Randall writes lots of patches, so
we can start to reflect upon what outcomes we want, what
Agreed.
goals we want to go for, but we need to start finalizing or defining what it is we're going to do. And so far we have a kind of a skeleton for intake, and we need to do some triage.
Send something in that I think looks real interesting for like a incident.
Yeah, I I did this recently firsthand, so it has that benefit slash detraction, I guess, whatever. I had more than one person involved. I could probably guesstimate the hours. I could describe the skills. This involved talking to 2 projects. It involved OSS security mailing list at the end. It involved assigning 3 CVE IDs. It was generated sort of off of some contract work we were doing, but this is the sort of open source, hey, we forgot to fix all the vols later, part of the problem. Point is, this, internet provided an example right in my lap, I guess, but if it helps as a small case study, and I don't want to derail us too much, and like we can do this now or next time, you can also just read this. This to me is a great example of what an open source CERT could do. Yeah.
So I would like to time check everyone. We have about
11
11 minutes left. We have covered a lot of different material, but I don't believe that we have made significant progress towards completing that particular section with time and resource and key milestone estimates. Art, I would recommend that we focus on what are the immediate next actions that we need to have to prep for the next meeting.
Yeah, so how we were into 2.2, we discussed triage briefly. I'm sorry, the new 2.2, which is the old 2.4. Where am I? Group 1, sorry, 2.1. 2.2. Yeah, sorry, about two topics ago, we were working through triage is the last point I remember us being. Emily, do you have track of how far we made it before we got distracted? Yep.
As far as the triaging portion goes, we identified that it needed to be done and that we needed conditions for it, but we had not identified whether or not there was any specific resource requests or financial needs associated
right.
with that outside of that initial ticketing system. It might be beneficial to identify what needs to happen with an incident management tool from our perspective based off of what we've discussed here today, because I think there was a lot of really good information. Whether or not, like, a good example would be if somebody does file an issue with us for service support, are we communicating with them through that service portal or is it through email? Do we need the ability to prioritize an issue that comes in and say this one is high priority with a justification? Or is it just a comment feature? So is there an information exchange within the tool that allows us to both see our own decisions internally and then share some of those decisions should we see fit with the reporting party and with others?
Oh, please. Yep.
Wouldn't it be important to determine the way that we're going to operate? Because I know that earlier we had said that if we're going to be more of like an educational type thing, we're going to be like helping people learn, or whether we're going to handle it on our own. Wouldn't that be important to establish?
I think
Yes.
that's part of the tiering process that we have yet to get to, is whether or not we are going to have tiers, and if we are, what do those tiers look like? There's all sorts of different kinds of services that we could potentially offer and different levels of triage. But I imagine that if somebody comes to us and requests like full-fledged support, please come help me deal with this now, versus can you just give me some instructions on how I should be communicating about this major security incident I'm already handling? They're still both going to be important, but our level of engagement is going to be slightly different.
I think that would probably be a good next step, Art, in my opinion.
I'm trying to find where Crow is.
I'm on the skeleton document.
Yeah,
Page 3, towards
so
the
I
bottom.
supposedly. Yeah, hang on. Here's. Okay, got it. All right, sorry.
So would that be worthwhile work, is to start to list capabilities, and then we can start to organize them into potential tiers of service?
I would argue that the first step is, or we can do it right now, which is, are we more focused on educational capacity, or are we focused on dealing with stuff? Because they're two very different things, and we do have an education SIG, just saying.
But somebody will need to hand the education SIG the materials to educate. So that content would need to be created here by the subject matter experts.
Correct.
I'm on the doing stuff side. That does not exclude, of course, education. For example, right, working with parties through a case is a great opportunity to educate. And then further, right, if there's feedback from the CERT or input from the CERT to educational efforts, that's also great too, because it hopefully was based in, an incident we're working on or just worked on or something like that. Personal opinion though, I'm happy to, if we want to not do that. But again, my original read is the CERT is a response team.
My only concern is that there's if it's critical, then it needs to get fixed as soon as possible, and it's not the best learning opportunity. But so I don't know if maybe we should segregate. So if you need a 1-800 number That's not us. But like if you have an incident, or if you have incidences that maybe you don't know how to respond to, maybe like that's our target market. So maybe identifying who are, so that we can solve something and also educate at the same time. You know what I mean? But don't call us if you're getting DDoS, because we can't do anything.
I think that's a good point, Randall, and something that certainly can be considered in the education versus the incident management portion of it. But I would ask you the taco burrito question of why not both? And that if something is super critical, we can also perform a retrospective with the team to educate
yep.
them after the fact, once everything is cooled off and everybody's taken a slight vacation from, dealing with Log4Shell right before major holidays. But I think, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to point out, just from my experience on the critical stuff, because we've dealt with it in Gen 2, is that if it is super critical, most of the time they don't like outside people getting involved. They kind of see an outside party like Gen 2 reporting a problem like that, like we already know about the problem and all you're doing is you're making it worse.
And that might be that particular mode is we are facilitators. We make sure that the reporter is talking to the appropriate people and not
Correct.
necessarily
That would be good.
handling the patch.
So with 4 minutes left, the action that I have written down is to determine educational opportunities through the SIRT services versus incident management through the SIRT services, and listing capabilities and their associated tiers of service. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, I think it is.
So is there a target number that we would like folks to come back to this meeting with so we can discuss them?
A target number of incidents?
Or target number of
services?
services, capabilities, corresponding educational opportunity, and engagement model.
Correct me if I'm wrong, our main service is walking people through the coordinated vulnerability process, right? Or like implementing that or executing that at some level, correct?
I don't believe that we've actually had that defined.
We have not had a time together as a team, which we will tomorrow, to talk about specific goals and outcomes we're looking for. And what I'm showing you here on the screen is from the PSIRT services framework. This is how vendor security teams generally are organized and the types of areas and services they provide. Our intake would be the discovery piece of the model.
Right.
But, from a vendor perspective, all of the areas we've talked about, upstream maintainers, education, all of it is part of the duties of the PSIRT. So that this is a model we can consider. Do we want to borrow anything from capabilities, services, whatever?
Point. Me take a note of that.
Definitely seems sensible, like a sensible default, I'm not gonna lie. Especially for this group.
And that group also put together a maturity model with suggested types of services. So this would be the basic level of services a PSIRT would want to provide. We're not going to have so much enterprise. We actually are going to have sponsorship and stakeholders. That's something we have to worry about.
No,
But just an example of some of the capabilities at a basic level CERT.
There.
I've noted to look at the first PSIRT SIG stuff as something to copy, steal, borrow from, and then
Open source.
It's open source, great. And I still have some doc editing stuff to do that I did not do for this week.
But I do agree with Emily that maybe tomorrow we can discuss like where we stand, because I do
Yes.
kind of what they say with the education and the critical, because I think that's kind of a difficult road to walk on,
Yeah, I think we're getting a sense too that, right, and tomorrow's a great way to do this, right? The three sub teams need a little bit of coordination, perhaps.
Yeah, I agree.
And we've already done a bit of this, right? So we're not stepping on each other's toes and all, but yeah, that may help tomorrow.
So Crab has one action, and Art, you have one action as well. And the rest of us should mull things over in the back of our head post meeting tomorrow.
Agree with that.
What did I agree to do? I'm sorry.
You're going to present the objective and the intent to the group tomorrow to receive
Yes.
consensus on direction forward.
Yes, that is already queued up in the agenda.
Most excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks all. I appreciate your time and attention.
Must run. Thank you all. Take care.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Jennifer.